が参ります。
It was during my high school days when I commuted to school by train. One day when the train arrived and I was getting on, a friend of mine who was going to school with me slipped in the gap between the train and the platform. There wasn't much distance between her and the train, and it stopped at her thighs. The conductor noticed, and instead of taking off, my friends and the people around us pulled her up. At that moment, I knelt down and peered into the gap between the train and the platform to check the condition of her legs. Something was wrapped around her ankle and covered in blood, dripping down her thighs and knees. I couldn't make out what was going on, so I strained my eyes to take a closer look. To my horror, I realized that an adult hand was holding her ankle, although it was unnaturally small, like a doll's. As I stared at it, the hand suddenly moved away and disappeared. All she said was that her foot slipped, so I think she was probably the only one who noticed it. I didn't pursue the matter at the time because she was in a panic, but after I had sent her away in an ambulance, I was horrified to remember it again. It didn't feel like a ghost. Those hands were so realistic. I thought it must be some sort of mysterious creature. This happened at a deserted station in the Tohoku countryside. This was told to me by my friend. He is not the type to make up such stories, and I believe him. When he was in middle school, he used to commute to school by train. One summer day, he accidentally dozed off in the train and woke up just in time to hurriedly get off at a deserted, unmanned station in the mountains. When he checked the timetable, he realized there wouldn't be another train heading in his direction for about an hour. I got off too quickly. If I had been more awake, I could have gotten off at the station with the shop and bought bread and juice, he grumbled as he made his way to the bench at the back of the platform. To his surprise, there were already some passengers sitting there. It was unusual to see so many people in such a remote area. As he approached them, his steps suddenly stopped. All of the people sitting on the bench were mannequins. Who put them there? He quickly turned his heel and headed to the other side of the platform. He felt uneasy approaching the mannequins and didn't want to meet the person who had placed them there. He said he felt extremely restless until the next train arrived. I saw a thread a while back asking, has anyone ever seen a shadow man? I've seen one myself, so I'll write about my experience here. The shadow man I saw was a little different. The person I saw was on the platform of the station, on the tracks. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. It wasn't pitch black, but a dark shadow, missing from below the knees, and a part of its head that touched its face had been gouged out. I thought it was abnormal, but at the time, I didn't have the time to process it. The shadow man was standing on the tracks under the platform, facing the train with his back arched and arms raised up to its face. I was standing there, unsure of what to do, with my palms slightly bent and facing outward. At the time, I didn't know about shadow people, so I was surprised, thinking, why is there someone on the tracks? The train is coming soon, it's dangerous. The shadow didn't react at all. There was an announcement that a train would arrive soon, but the shadow man didn't move. Wouldn't someone help me? If we continue like this, we're going to run over someone. I panicked, but the others around me didn't even seem to have seen it. The train came to the platform with the sound of brakes. I instinctively covered my eyes, thinking, it's going to run you over. But I couldn't help but scream. I thought it was a mistake. But when I looked over, the Shadow Man was still standing there. Only its head and eyes were sticking out from the floor of the train. Then I turned my head, and I saw a face with no eyes, nose, or mouth. But it was definitely seeing me. I gasped and froze. Someone came up from behind me. I bumped into the train and was told, if you're not going to get on, please leave. I turned around and apologized. I'm sorry, and faced the train again. But the doors were just about to close. The train departed with an announcement. That Shadow Man was gone. Just before the door closed, I saw that shadow clinging to one passenger's leg. I still wonder, what happened to that passenger? It was just the day before yesterday. That day, I was late because I had to attend a talk with my seminar professor, so I took the last train home. Since my house was in the countryside and it was the last train, there was no one else in the car except me. There were still 7 stops before I had to get off, so I dozed off. Then I realized it was extremely cold. I initially thought the air conditioner was too effective, but something felt off. That's when I heard a sound, like a supermarket bag being crumpled. The noise was coming from overhead, and when I looked up, I saw someone lying on the net rack where I put my luggage. I was sitting in the booster seat right next to the entrance. The person was lying on the rack, directly above the booster seat across from me, grinning widely. His hair was messy, his face had an earthy, purplish color, and his skin was cracked, making it hard to tell if he was male or female, young or old. The crunching sound was his breathing mixed with it. His eyes weren't on me, but he was busy moving around. Instinctively, I felt I shouldn't make eye contact with him, but I couldn't look away. For some reason, I'd completely forgotten how to move my eyes. Even if I wanted to run away, the only way to escape was to pass by him. I was already panicking. He continued, making inaudible words and rolling his yellowed eyes. Just when I was about to reach my mental limit, I arrived at the station. I jumped out of the train, as if rolling out. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw him, looking at me. I had to walk 2 stations home, but I couldn't stand being in the same space as him. By the way, I've been hearing crunching noises coming from the room next to me, but I want to believe it's just the cat playing. Maybe it's not too scary, but this happened a long time ago. We were planning to go out for drinks with my girlfriend's friend and her girlfriend's girlfriend. Her friend's girlfriend had just finished work and was on the train, heading to the local station where we were. I considered going into a store first, but with about 15 minutes until her train arrived, I decided to wait in front of the station. My friend headed towards the ticket gate to check the train timetable. I was sitting on the fence next to the railroad crossing, smoking a cigarette. The location was along a certain private railway line in Osaka. Despite being called Osaka, it was in the countryside, on the outskirts, so it was a very poor and shabby station, with few passers-by at night. That particular night was clear, with a bright moon and no wind at all. Because there was no wind, the cigarette smoke rose straight up like a stick. I was sitting there, staring blankly at the smoke coming from the tip of my cigarette, when suddenly, the straight smoke curved into a dogleg shape. Feeling uneasy, I casually looked to my left. Suddenly a hand appeared around my waist. The arm looked burnt and had a black keloid-like appearance. The blood vessel stood out in the moonlight, making it look very realistic. This black arm seemed to wrap around my waist, moving from the left side to the right. I jumped to the right to avoid the arm. When I looked back, it was gone. I quickly turned to my friend and said, "Did you see that? Something happened. It was scary." My friend, who doesn't believe in ghosts, looked at me coldly and said, "I don't believe in things like that." I couldn't get anyone to believe me, but it's a true story. Something happened recently at a coffee shop. I was just killing time when I started hearing a noise at the table next to me. A crunching sound. At first, I didn't pay much attention and continued reading my book. However, the noise persisted, even after about 30 minutes. I grew curious and turned around to see what it was. To my shock, it was a woman eating fingernails. Not just a few, but an unusual amount, enough to fill a 1-liter milk carton. These were not cut nails either. They were in perfect shape, as if they had just been peeled off. The woman appeared to be in her 30s, dressed normally, with a cup of what seemed to be coffee in front of her. What caught my attention the most was her hands. Upon closer inspection, I noticed she had claws. She was staring at me intently, and as fear overtook me, I hurriedly looked away. I felt an overwhelming sense of danger and decided to leave the coffee shop immediately. After exiting, I crossed the intersection and headed to the station. Among the bustling crowd, I felt a brief sense of relief, thinking I'd escaped her. However, at the station ticket gate, the woman appeared again. Despite the many people around, I maneuvered my way through the crowd, passed through the ticket gate, and reached the platform. The woman was nowhere to be seen on the platform, and I relaxed once I boarded the train. But just as the train was about to leave, she ran onto it, causing me to panic again. She stood in front of me, holding her strap. I froze as she silently took out the milk carton filled with fingernails and began eating them again. The train continued moving, and the woman did nothing but eat her nails. 2 stations before my destination, I lightly pushed her aside and got off the train. She did not follow me. To this day, I am still baffled by what transpired. This is something I have actually witnessed before. The Keio Line platform in Shinjuku is underground. To get to the platform, you go down the stairs from the ticket gate. It was one busy day, and there was a man on the landing halfway down the stairs. He had an injured hand or arm, evidenced by the bandage he was wearing. He was a middle-aged man in plain clothes, carrying a folding bag. As I was walking down the stairs and was about to reach the landing, he appeared to miss the step and suddenly fell down the stairs. He tumbled into a line of 5 or 6 people waiting for the first train, causing quite a commotion as those standing on the platform were knocked down. I heard a yelp and for a moment feared that someone might fall onto the tracks. Luckily, only a few people fell onto the platform. and no one was seriously injured. The man who had fallen apologized profusely, and the scene was cleared up quickly. A few seconds later, a train arrived at the platform. Those familiar with Shinjuku Station on the Keio line know that there is only one track between the platforms. This means that if you accidentally fall onto the tracks, there is nowhere to escape. Although this was a minor incident, it felt like it could have been something more serious to me. From my perspective, it seemed like the bandaged man wasn't just missing a step. He appeared to be running down the stairs intentionally. It struck me that his goal was always the queue for the train. I might have been the only one who saw him running from the start. The injury in his bandaged arm seemed to be fake as well, and his eyes had a strange, dull look. After that, everyone got onto the train as if nothing had happened. I, who had witnessed the entire series of events from the top of the stairs, also boarded the train. As I waited for the train to depart, I contemplated whether I should inform the station staff or the police. My thoughts were interrupted when I glanced towards the platform and met the man's eyes. He was wandering around the platform with no intention of boarding the train. His eyes seemed to be always on me. Eventually, the train departed and he disappeared from sight, but the unease stayed with me that night when I got home. In the end, I didn't report the incident to the station staff or the police. I convinced myself it might just be my imagination and didn't want to blow things out of proportion. However, whenever I ride the Keio line, I still remember that day. I wonder what would have happened if someone had fallen onto the tracks. Would I have testified then? My friend was trying to get on the train when he slipped in the gap between the train and the platform. I quickly called for a station staff member to pull him out. But suddenly, my friend glared at me. It was a look filled with a level of anger I couldn't imagine from someone who usually just messes around. The expression on his face was so intense and unexpected that I couldn't understand why. I was so flustered that I fainted on the spot. When I came to, my friend was slowly getting up and glaring at me. For some reason, even the station staff were glaring at me. Then, I heard a loud laugh coming from inside the train. I looked over and saw the passengers all leaning over and staring at me with strange faces. What is this? Some kind of theater company? I trembled with fear and put on a bit of bravado. But there was no reaction. Everyone there just silently glared at me. I was at my limit, trembling. I stood up and ran away from the platform. As soon as I left the station, I heard the sound of a train starting to move. I took a breather and returned to the platform. Then, my friend was there again. The station employee from earlier was also at the office, as if nothing had happened. That day, I was too scared to call my friend, so I walked home instead of getting back onto the train. The next day when I was at school, the first thing I saw was my friend. He asked me, "Where did you go yesterday?" When I told him about the incident on the platform and how I suddenly disappeared, he said he didn't know anything about it. Where had I been? On the day that this happened, I was at Shinjuku Station, waiting for a friend. It was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. After waiting for a while, I received a call from my friend. "Where are you now?" And, "Sorry, I just got on the train in Kawasaki." I recall he said something along those lines. So he had just left Kawasaki, which meant it would be about 30 to 40 minutes before he arrived. While pondering how to kill time, I was about to hang up saying, "Well, come quickly." At that moment, I saw my friend at the station ticket gate. He was just kidding. If you're gonna do that, I'm gonna sneak up and surprise him, I thought. I approached him while still talking on the phone. That's when I noticed that the person in front of me didn't have a cell phone in his hand. But I was still talking to him on the phone. Did I mistake someone else for him? But as I got closer, the person noticed me and said something like, "Sorry I kept you waiting." Meanwhile, I was still talking to my friend on the phone. Feeling confused, I asked, "Who are you? What's going on?" That's when I snapped. The incoming call number and the voice on the phone were definitely my friend's. But there was no record of such a call on his cell phone. When I told my real friend about it later, he looked at me like I was crazy, saying, "What are you talking about?" Even the call history on my cell phone seemed to have been somehow planted. It was a strange and, honestly, terrifying event. This is a ghost story, or rather, a story that isn't funny in some other sense. For the time being, there are no ghosts or anything like that. If you live in Tokyo, you probably know about the JR Chuo line. Accidents resulting in personal injury happen quite frequently there. Perhaps spirits are calling, but I think it's mostly because platforms are exposed to the trains these days. I use a certain station on the Chuo line for my daily commute, and at night, the station platform is often crowded with tired office workers and drunk people. That particular day, at the front of the line, was an old man, seemingly on his way home from work. He appeared heavily intoxicated, wandering aimlessly. Every so often, as if concerned about the approaching train, he would step over the white safety line and lean towards the tracks, peering down. Noticing this, I became increasingly anxious and prepared myself to pull him back in case of a real emergency. Eventually, the train approached with its distinctive vibration, and I focused intently on the old man's position. In the end, the old man was unharmed. In fact, it seemed like he sobered up instantly, because, unexpectedly, the woman next to me jumped in as well. Honestly, at that moment, rather than feeling confused or worried, all I could think was, that's it? Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. If you have a story to share, please send it to my email in the description below. This channel is mostly made up of stories sent in by viewers or people they know. Another way to support the channel is to sign up for my Patreon, where you can watch my videos ad-free. More perks will be added in the new year. Also, I will be adding new designs to the merch store, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you all for your continuous support. And remember,
Papa loves you.